She hadn't said a word, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't broken a rule. Yet 3 officers closed in like she triggered a bomb. Her only crime? Walking toward the VIP diplomatic lane while being black and dressed in quiet confidence. One guard smirked and asked if she got lost. Another tore her clearance letter in half without reading it. "Ma'am," he said, "this area's for real delegates." And just like that, they rerouted her to the economy security line, forced her to take off her heels, empty her bag, and explain why someone like her was flying with sealed financial documents. What they didn't know was that the woman they were humiliating didn't just have clearance, she controlled it. One tap from her biometric card could shut down the terminal. One call could pause a multi-country infrastructure deal they weren't even cleared to know about. But she stayed silent, for now. Because she wasn't here to be seen. She was here to watch. And when the truth finally hits, the question won't be, why didn't she say anything? It'll be, how many systems are built to silence women like her before they even speak? Think you know where this is going? You don't. Hit subscribe if you're ready to find out. What moment made your jaw drop? Tell us in the comments, and where you're watching from. This one's just getting started. The automatic glass doors parted with a whisper as Alora Hayes stepped into the executive terminal of Halden International. Cool, air-conditioned silence wrapped around her like velvet as the sounds of the general concourse faded behind her. Unlike the chaos of the regular immigration halls, this corridor gleamed with polished marble, brass nameplates, and an air of unspoken hierarchy. Her heels clicked softly as she approached the VIP customs channel, a private corridor adorned with dark oak panels, and a bronze plaque that read Diplomatic and Strategic Entry, Authorized Access Only. Alora walked with calm confidence. She'd flown through terminals in Berlin, Casablanca, Nairobi, and D.C. without issue. Her credentials were impeccable. An official diplomatic pass issued under the Bridge Africa 2030 initiative, endorsed directly by the U.S. Department of Treasury and marked with an iris scan code only 3 people on the continent had ever used. Today wasn't about travel, it was about impact. Inside her leather folio was a sealed investment dossier detailing the final tranche of a multi-billion-dollar international investment. Her signature alone would unlock over $600 million in accelerated infrastructure funds. As she stepped toward the checkpoint, the agent behind the security desk barely glanced up. He was a white man, mid-40s, square jaw, short cropped hair under a TSA-style cap. His name tag read L. Swanson. Alora held up her ID and diplomatic badge without a word. Swanson blinked, then frowned. Slowly, he leaned forward, took the badge, and tilted it toward the light like he suspected it was a counterfeit dollar bill. "This is real?" he asked flatly. Alora's voice was calm. "Yes. Diplomatic authorization from the Treasury Office. Level red." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "Level red? That a new Starbucks drink or something?" She didn't smile. She didn't flinch. She simply extended her travel folio with a sealed clearance letter tucked inside. Swanson took it with 2 fingers like it might be wet. Behind him, another security officer, taller, younger, walked over and glanced at the folder. "Let me guess," he said, addressing no one in particular, "some new fast-track influencer program? Or mail-order dignitary?" Swanson muttered. The taller guard laughed. "She got that badge on Etsy." Swanson flipped open the letter, scanned it briefly, then looked back at her. "This is from the Department of Treasury," he said, emphasizing each word like they were part of a joke. Alora gave a single nod. Swanson rolled his eyes, then looked at his colleague. "Printed this morning on her lunch break." He turned back to Alora. "Ma'am, I don't know who gave you this paperwork, but this line is reserved for legitimate diplomatic personnel, heads of state, and strategic executives. You don't meet that description." Alora remained motionless, but her eyes locked onto his. "I'm the U.S. designated trustee on the Bridge Africa initiative. I have authority equivalent to a foreign affairs envoy under the Bilateral Strategic Trade Act of 2025. "That's so," Swanson said. "Well, you're welcome to explain that to the general screening team. They'll love hearing all about your strategic status." He slapped a red sticker on her folio. "Reroute to standard intake. Gate A12. She took a slow breath. I'm not being rerouted. Then, you're not passing through this lane. The taller guard stepped forward slightly, folding his arms. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. Alora remained still for one heartbeat longer, then slowly reached for her folio. But just before she could take it, Swanson ripped the clearance letter in half. Oops, he said casually, letting the pieces fall into the trash. Guess that answers that. Alora's hands froze midair. Her gaze didn't waver, but the silence between them sharpened like broken glass. That was federal property, she said quietly. Not anymore, Swanson replied. You're not authorized to carry it. A pause. We'll be calling this in. Good, Alora said. So will I. She turned on her heel and walked away, her movements measured, but her pulse simmering beneath the surface. The next few minutes passed like fog. She was rerouted to the Economy Customs lane, her badge deactivated, her documents under review. Each step away from the VIP corridor felt like a descent, out of a world she belonged to, and into the world they insisted she did. The people around her shifted uncomfortably, a few glancing at her, as if she didn't belong in line with them either. Alora didn't speak, didn't flinch. But inside, her memory was cataloging every word, every look, every shred of arrogance, recording it not for revenge, but for revelation. They thought they'd stop someone small. What they'd done, in fact, was trigger a process far bigger than any protocol they thought they controlled. Alora stood at the edge of the security line, her diplomatic clearance now nothing more than a ghost in the system. The General Customs queue stretched ahead of her, slow-moving and uncomfortably crowded, filled with confused tourists, irritated business travelers, and restless families corralling their children. She was the only one not looking down at a phone or fumbling through passports. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, jaw clenched with a restraint honed through years of boardroom tension. She had been rerouted like a low-priority passenger, without explanation that made sense, and more importantly, without due process. The red sticker Swanson had slapped on her folio might as well have been a scarlet letter, flagging her for enhanced screening like a threat instead of a partner to national interest. The metal queue gates clinked as she moved forward, each step stripping more layers of identity she had worked decades to earn. When she reached the checkpoint, a short, broad-shouldered officer waved her into a separate lane. Secondary screening. Follow me. She didn't argue. She stepped into the glass cubicle, watching as the officer gestured for her to place her bag in a separate tray. Shoes off. Jewelry. Belt. Wig, if applicable. Alora turned her head slowly. Excuse me. Hair, he clarified, without looking at her. Synthetic or natural? It's mine, she said firmly. Then remove your shoes and step forward. No, please. No, ma'am. Just the tone of someone certain they were right, and the other person didn't deserve to ask why. Alora did as instructed, placing her pumps into the tray, along with her earrings and travel cuff. Her blazer was removed, followed by her scarf, which a female agent immediately held up to the light, stretching the silk between her fingers like it might reveal contraband. You can't be serious, Alora muttered. The agent didn't answer. Instead, she signaled to another attendant, a younger woman with a buzz cut and oversized gloves. Full body check, palms down, feet apart. The younger woman approached. Spread M, she said under her breath, loud enough for Alora to hear, but soft enough to deny. Alora's breath tightened in her chest. She complied, holding herself still as latex hands swept across her ribs, hips, thighs, and ankles. The gloves hesitated at her chest, then again at her lower back. You're clear, the buzz-cut agent finally said, stepping back. For now. Alora reached for her belongings, but a voice snapped. Not yet. A different officer, this one behind the bag scanner, held up her leather folio like a suspicious package. We've got irregular density here, he said. Might be concealed items. Alora stepped closer. That's a sealed diplomatic investment file. It's encrypted. You don't have jurisdiction to open that. I have jurisdiction to inspect anything that enters this terminal, encrypted or not, the officer said without lifting his eyes. Step back. He unzipped the folio with unnecessary aggression, flipping through pages he clearly didn't understand. Spreadsheets, memoranda, legal briefs, all confidential, all protected by federal finance law. Still, he grunted like he'd uncovered state secrets. "She's carrying files marked private financial holdings," he announced. "We'll need to report this to fraud prevention. It's literally labeled U.S. Africa Bilateral Development," Elora said, her tone cutting through. "Signed by 3 Treasury officers. Your name isn't one of them." That earned her a hard look. "You keep talking, and I'll add obstruction to the report," he said, slamming the folder shut. Meanwhile, at the personal item station, a female TSA agent was unzipping Elora's tote bag with exaggerated care. As she pulled out a sleek leather wallet and a book of economic policy notes, she laughed quietly and turned to her colleague. "Girl, if she had real money, she wouldn't be wearing slacks from an outlet sale." Her voice wasn't hushed. It was performative. Elora heard it clearly. The second agent snorted, eyeing the modest label on Elora's coat. "The way some folks play dress up to feel important, I swear." No one intervened. No supervisor stepped in. To them, this wasn't abuse. It was business as usual. Elora didn't respond, didn't flinch. But her eyes tracked every face, every name tag, every laugh that hung too long in the air. She wasn't just memorizing them. She was archiving them for later. The folder was sealed again, but the atmosphere wasn't. It was taut, bristling with unspoken challenge. Elora had endured the personal searches, the sarcasm, the passive humiliation. But now, the tone shifted from disrespect to deliberate obstruction. She moved to retrieve her documents from the tray when a man in a navy jacket stepped into her path. His ID badge swung lightly from his neck. Thomas S. Renner, Senior Security Manager. He didn't smile, didn't blink, just extended a gloved hand toward her rolling carry-on. "I need you to unlock the black case, ma'am," he said. Elora's gaze narrowed. "That case contains federally encrypted material. I'm not authorized to open it outside a classified compliance zone." Renner raised a brow, uninterested. "We don't operate under your protocol. Here, you comply with ours." "You're demanding I breach secure protocol under your own assumption?" "No assumption," he replied. "You've triggered an alert, sealed contents without disclosed manifest, and your clearance has been flagged as unverified." "Flagged by whom?" Elora asked sharply. Renner didn't answer. He simply gestured toward the case again. "Unlock it now, or I'll file it under Section 28C, possible concealment with intent to export undeclared assets." Elora's pulse tightened. "You have no legal standing to enforce that code without escalation from federal oversight." Renner leaned in slightly, voice low. "And you'll have no standing at all if you keep challenging me in my terminal." She stood still. She said nothing. But inside, something flared. She had seen power misused before, in boardrooms, in banking negotiations, in political lobbies. But here, in a corridor built for fast-track diplomacy, it stung in a different way. This wasn't just about control. It was about erasure. When she didn't respond, Renner made a quick motion to a nearby agent. "Item 4, secure for customs hold," he ordered. "Market pending fraud review and international transfer violation." The agent nodded and rolled the case away as if it were an unclaimed lunchbox. Elora watched it disappear down a hallway where cameras didn't reach. "On what grounds?" she asked. Renner turned back to her. "Suspicion of smuggling and potential financial fraud. You failed to provide verified justification for your clearance claim, and your possession of sealed documentation suggests material concealment." Elora's tone dropped. "That's not suspicion. That's projection." "And your protest," he said, "just escalated you to a new classification." He turned to a terminal, logged in, and typed rapidly. Within seconds, the printer beside him whirred to life. He pulled out a 2-page report and held it up. Across the top, bold red letters read, "Passenger Underwatch Code X7." Below that, her name, Hayes Elora Marie. The form included a paragraph-long justification, half of it vague and speculative. Subject refused inspection, displayed non-compliant demeanor, carried non-declared secured items, and disputed procedural instructions. "What is X7?" she asked, voice colder now. Renner replied without looking at her. "It authorizes full-scale review and detainment protocol. All travel activity will be suspended pending clearance. You'll be moved into an extended observation queue, 5 hours minimum." "This is abuse of process," she said. "No," he said, already affixing the form to a clipboard. "This is enforcement of authority. Take her to Bay 6. An officer behind her gripped her arm, not forcefully, but firmly enough to signal control. Alora stepped away without resistance, her expression unreadable. As she was escorted down a hallway that reeked faintly of bleach and burnt coffee, a door opened ahead of her into a dim waiting bay lined with plastic chairs, a wall clock stuck at 3:17, and a two-way mirror reflecting nothing but silence. She sat. No one spoke to her. Her bag was gone. Her documents were gone. Her status, for now, meant nothing, not because it wasn't real, but because those who wielded power around her refused to believe it could belong to someone like her. The clock in Base 6 didn't move, but Alora's patience did. She sat perfectly still, hands folded over her lap, feet grounded like roots in stone, while overhead, the ventilation hummed with cold indifference. A lone security agent walked past the window every few minutes, occasionally glancing in, never meeting her eyes long enough to suggest anything resembling professionalism. After nearly an hour of calculated silence, a door clicked open behind her. "Hayes," a voice barked. She stood without delay, following the officer through a side corridor where the harsh fluorescent lights flickered with the same hesitancy that laced the staff's tone every time she asserted her credentials. They reached a secondary processing station, this one dimly lit, with scuffed floors and old metal desks that looked more like an interrogation wing than a customs checkpoint. A man in a gray uniform sat behind the desk, idly flipping through a stack of forms. He looked up as she approached, then down at her passport. His eyes flicked from the diplomatic visa to her face, then back again, and without even a beat, he asked, "So which billionaire did you marry to get this kind of access?" Alora didn't answer, not because she didn't have words, but because the question wasn't deserving of them. The officer smirked at her silence, nodding slightly as if confirming a personal suspicion. "Come on," he added, motioning to another guard. "Escort her upstairs for final verification." They walked in silence through another secured hallway until they arrived at the top floor corridor that led to the executive lounges. The architecture shifted again, marble returned, carpets thickened, and silence now carried a different tone, entitlement. As they approached the lounge entrance, Alora adjusted her coat and straightened her shoulders. She'd been here before. In fact, she had presented at an international roundtable in one of these very lounges only 6 months ago. The guard paused to open the door for her, then stepped aside without speaking. She stepped in alone. The receptionist behind the counter, a slender woman with a headset and a clipboard, barely glanced up before placing a hand on the desk. "One moment," she said coolly. Alora waited. A pause passed. The receptionist tapped her tablet, then finally looked up, her smile sharp and clipped. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this lounge is reserved for executives, diplomatic delegates, and royal affiliates." Alora pulled out her authorization card and slid it across the counter. "I know. I'm one of them." The receptionist looked at the card, blinked twice, then scanned it with a handheld reader. The scanner lit green. Still, she didn't move. "There must be a mistake. You don't look like someone with active diplomatic credentials." "Excuse me. You're not on the expected list," the receptionist replied. "Perhaps you redeemed points for this tier access? That happens sometimes. The system takes a few hours to update." "I didn't use points," Alora said, her voice low but firm. "I am a registered diplomatic partner under the Bilateral Infrastructure Accord, currently holding a level red authorization." "I understand," the receptionist said in a tone that suggested she absolutely did not. "But I'll need to verify that with someone from your sponsoring organization." "You mean the United States Treasury?" Alora asked, raising an eyebrow. The receptionist smiled again, tightly. "Sure. Or whoever filled out your forms." At that moment, a flight attendant entered the lounge to escort another VIP to a private boarding area. She paused upon seeing Alora standing at the counter and asked, "Is there an issue?" The receptionist leaned in and whispered just loud enough for Alora to hear. "She's trying to access the lounge on some kind of upgraded clearance, possibly through points." "I'm checking now." The flight attendant nodded, then gave Alora a brief once-over before saying, "Ma'am, unless you're accompanying an executive or representing a formal agency, we'll need you to wait outside." Alora's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the counter. Her jaw tensed. She inhaled once through her nose and said nothing. They didn't know who they were speaking to. Not really. They saw the skin tone, the silence, the restraint, and assumed lesser. Assumed outsider. Her clearance didn't matter to them, not when their eyes had already made the judgment. And despite the fact that her card still glowed green in the scanner, and her credentials were confirmed in multiple encrypted systems. The tension inside the lounge hadn't faded. It had only thickened, like humidity in a locked room. Alora's clearance card still pulsed green on the scanner, but it didn't matter. She could see it in the way the receptionist's lips curled slightly upward, not in welcome, but in quiet mockery. She'd already been categorized incorrectly, unfairly, but definitively. The attendant made a show of turning to her terminal, fingers clacking too fast to be real data entry, just stalling, scanning through Alora's name in the system, as if it were a criminal lookup. Then, without warning, a supervisor in a charcoal blazer emerged from the hallway behind the desk, holding a slim tablet and wearing the kind of smile designed to appear neutral while disguising condescension. His badge read M. Kessler Terminal Compliance Officer. He didn't introduce himself, just took the scanner from the receptionist and tapped twice. Within seconds, his screen lit up with Alora's file. He scanned the overview with a practiced, dismissive rhythm before suddenly pausing, his brow arching. "Huh," he said aloud, smirking slightly. "Declares mid-eight figures annually, yet booked coach class on an international route? Interesting." He didn't look up as he said it, just scrolled casually through the financial metadata linked to her travel profile, then tilted the tablet toward the receptionist as if to share a joke. "It says here she's part of a development fund, but it's structured through layered shell entities. Cayman, Johannesburg, DC. Doesn't scream transparent." Alora's expression didn't change, but her spine lengthened. "All of that is disclosed and cleared under international banking compliance. You're not authorized to access or interpret those structures." "I didn't interpret," Kessler replied, still grinning. "I just observed. And what I'm observing is someone flying with high-level financial privileges and very little institutional context." He turned the tablet back toward himself, tapped into another screen, and continued. "Let's see who vouched for her clearance. Oh, Department of Treasury. No contact protocol listed." He paused dramatically, then added, "Of course." Without asking for permission or further justification, he pressed a button labeled Escalate. A soft, alert tone chirped from his device. "What did you just do?" Alora asked, voice cool. "Standard protocol," Kessler answered, still without looking at her. "When we see patterns like yours, unusual wealth routing, vague institutional ties, aggressive claim of diplomatic immunity, we refer the case to our customs escalation team." "There's nothing vague about my ties," Alora said, stepping forward slightly. "I am the acting trustee of a joint intergovernmental initiative with confirmed active backing from 2 national finance ministries." "And yet," Kessler said, finally meeting her eyes, "you're standing here trying to access a lounge, not being escorted to a tarmac vehicle like every other real diplomat I've seen this week." He gestured behind him, where a glass wall showed a convoy arriving for a head of state. "Those people don't explain themselves. Those people are believed before they speak," Alora said. "That's the difference." A tense silence hung for a second. Then Kessler smiled again, tight and smug. "Well, someone will be speaking to you shortly. Customs fraud and asset control. You triggered a review flag the moment you refused to open your case downstairs. We've logged a probable misuse of diplomatic credentials and potential underreported cross-border asset transport." "That's not just incorrect," Alora said. "It's defamatory. Only if proven false, Kessler replied, tapping his screen once more. And until that's determined, you'll be held under discretionary audit. Please remain in this area. Movement will reflect poorly on your compliance score. Behind him, the receptionist's eyes darted nervously between Alora and the tablet. Alora said nothing. She took a step back from the counter, folding her arms. Her case had been locked away. Her travel record now included a false report. And an entire security chain had just acted on a lie because it fit the image they had already written for her. She didn't pace. She didn't fume. She simply waited, watching the glass doors for the next round of accusations to arrive. Alora remained where she stood, eyes fixed on the reflective surface of the glass, as her distorted silhouette seemed to echo the reality unraveling around her. It had been 37 minutes since Kessler filed the escalation, and already she felt the effects rippling outward like shockwaves through a closed system. The first sign was subtle. Her digital boarding pass on her phone flickered, then vanished. A network timeout message replaced it, though the airport's Wi-Fi signal remained strong. Then came a second alert. Her lounge access QR code was invalidated. She tapped to reload it, but the interface kicked her out, flashing a red error. Account access denied, code 443. Restricted passenger profile. The concierge tablet at the desk behind her chimed twice, and the receptionist stared at it briefly before quietly turning the screen away from public view. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Alora already knew. Her credentials were being silently erased, not revoked through due process or authority, but through a cascade of unchecked assumptions, fed by bias and hidden beneath the mask of protocol. Her identity within the system was no longer aligned with what she represented. It was being recoded to fit what they wanted her to be, a problem. She turned slowly as a new figure approached from the administrative wing, a woman in a crisp blazer with a tight ponytail and the clipped gait of someone trained to deliver bad news with a smile. MS. Hayes, the woman said, tone brisk but polite. I'm Marissa Talcott from Guest Resolution. Alora didn't offer a handshake. She simply nodded once. I've reviewed your case, Marissa continued, producing a slim folder. And while we understand there may be confusion regarding your documentation, our systems have flagged multiple inconsistencies that now prevent us from validating your current travel privileges. Alora tilted her head, such as. Marissa opened the folder theatrically, as if reading for an audience. Flagged account activity, travel behavior inconsistent with declared status, and refusal to comply with verification protocol regarding transported assets. None of which, Alora said calmly, are true. We're not making legal determinations, Marissa replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We're acting to protect institutional risk. She slid a form across the table. If you'd like to resolve this quickly, there is an option. Alora didn't move. Marissa continued, tapping the form with a manicured nail. You sign this release, stating that you are not presently representing or affiliated with any organization linked to intergovernmental financing initiatives or bilateral trade projects. If you do that, we can lift the current restriction and escort you to the nearest exit. Alora stared at the paper. You want me to disavow my own position? We want to minimize exposure, Marissa said gently. Sometimes the fastest path through conflict is simply stepping around it. Alora's jaw tensed. And what happens to my credentials, my cargo, my diplomatic documentation? They'll be returned once the investigation is closed. Which could take how long? That depends on cooperation. So if I resist the narrative you're writing, I'm punished. If I erase myself to make you comfortable, I'm released. Marissa smiled again, softer this time. It's not personal, MS. Hayes. It's just what's required in today's climate. Alora slowly reached out, not for the pen, but for the form. She held it between two fingers and studied it like it were an artifact from a world she no longer recognized. The language was carefully crafted, each clause designed to look harmless, while absolving the institution of all responsibility. If she signed it, her name would vanish from the diplomatic roster for the remainder of the fiscal cycle. She would become exactly what they believed her to be, a footnote, a mistake, a cautionary tale in their system logs. Her access would remain revoked. The funds she was meant to release would stall, and her silence would become the signature they needed to justify everything that came before. Marissa waited. The receptionist didn't look up. Kessler was somewhere nearby, watching the logs update as her privileges vanished line by line. Her credentials weren't just suspended, they were being rewritten. Alora sat down slowly, her body composed, her expression unreadable, her fingertips still lightly touching the document Marissa had laid before her like a trap disguised as a compromise. She let the silence hang in the air for just long enough to make everyone in the room feel its weight. Then, with precise calm, she reached into the inner lining of her coat and withdrew a flat, black card the size of a standard ID. No logo, no numbers, just a single faint strip of iridescent metal, and a recessed biometric scan plate embedded along its edge. Marissa tilted her head slightly, as if trying to decipher the object's purpose, her tone still syrupy. "Is that another form of identification?" "You could say that," Alora said evenly. From the side pocket of her travel folio, she removed a compact encryption terminal, silver-cased, fingerprint-sealed, government-issued to high-trust fiduciaries with discretionary command access. She set it on the table, slid the card into the reader slot, and without looking up, pressed her thumb against the biometric plate. The screen blinked once, then pulsed blue, then green. Alora's voice didn't rise, but her words were deliberate. Authorization Hayes. Genesis Account Class 7. Execute Priority Override. Protocol 03-1 Red. Marissa straightened. "Excuse me, what are you?" But before the sentence finished, the terminal chirped, and a verification seal appeared on screen, displaying a flashing directive. Bridge Africa Oversight Key confirmed. U.S. Treasury Partner Class. Active. Executing interlock. In the airport's internal control hub 3 floors above, an IT systems analyst monitoring regional compliance traffic saw a red band slash across his screen. It wasn't an error. It was an override. An external signal had triggered an emergency audit lockout on multiple protocols, screening, customs routing, clearance denial logs, all centered on a single passenger ID. Hayes Alora. Within 90 seconds, a cascade of high-priority alerts began flooding terminals throughout airport operations. Senior Operations Management received an internal compliance directive from the Department of the Treasury's Secure Command Network. The message was blunt, bold, and required no interpretation. Immediate cease and desist. All active procedures regarding passenger Alora Hayes must be suspended. Subject is an authorized financial trustee overseeing strategic funding under bilateral economic initiative. Misidentification and obstruction constitute grounds for federal audit under Clause 14.2. Notify legal counsel immediately. In the security annex, a manager turned pale as his screen updated live. Override Acknowledge Directive 03-1, level red. At the Customs Enforcement Wing, a real-time map populated on their primary system, highlighting every interaction node where Alora had been processed, rerouted, or flagged. Red indicators pulsed through the network like a tracking beacon. TSA Gate, Checkpoint 2, Lounge Kiosk, Customs Gate 5, Detention Bay 6. One of the compliance officers swiveled in his chair toward his supervisor and whispered, "She's not just a diplomat. She's the one holding the final key." In the operations command room, another alert appeared at the top of the hierarchy stack, bolder than the rest, outlined in federal gray and sealed with the Treasury emblem. Bridge Africa Stakeholder Strategic Priority Top-Tier Clearance Authorized Executor. Hayes, Alora do not engage. Meanwhile, back in the lounge, the tablet on Marissa's desk vibrated violently as all systems linked to Alora's profile began auto-reinstating privileges. Lounge access, global support tier, priority boarding, encrypted cargo, hold visibility. The screen no longer displayed her as a restricted traveler, but now flashed with VIP override symbols typically reserved for cabinet-level officials and foreign dignitaries. Marissa's breath caught in her throat as she read the header, now glowing in amber across the top. Trustee Override Activated Subject holds command signatory power for multi-billion investment tranche. Delay equals federal risk. Alora didn't look at her. She simply folded the form Marissa had offered and pushed it gently across the table with a calm, deliberate hand. The room had grown still in the wake of the override, a kind of controlled paralysis infecting the air around Alora as Marissa stood motionless, staring at the terminal that moments ago had tried to digitally erase a woman now recognized as one of the most powerful financial figures in the building. The ambient lighting hummed with a low whine. Monitors continued updating with reinstated credentials, and yet no one in the room spoke, because no one knew what to say. Then, without warning, the secure door at the side of the executive lounge swung open with a swift hiss of hydraulics. Two individuals stepped inside in tailored black suits, both wearing diplomatic badges that bore the seal of the International Strategic Investment Union, one of the highest governing coalitions for multinational infrastructure initiatives. Their shoes echoed sharply against the polished floor, but they did not rush. They walked with the deliberate calm of authority, of certainty, of knowing they belonged in spaces where others only hoped for access. The taller of the two, a man with silver-rimmed glasses and a diplomat's posture, carried a sealed envelope bearing the crimson insignia of the ISIU and a watermark only visible under encrypted clearance protocols. He addressed the room without hesitation, his tone formal but edged with urgency. "We are here on behalf of the Global Infrastructure Delegation and the Bilateral Investment Commission. We are delivering a priority letter under immediate compliance." He stepped forward, handing the envelope directly to Marissa, who accepted it with fingers that had gone noticeably pale. "The contents confirm that Ms. Alora Hayes," he said, emphasizing her name clearly, "is the designated fiduciary signatory for Phase 3 of the Bridge Africa Infrastructure Disbursement. Her authorization is not only active, it is the final trigger for international capital release. Without her presence and verified confirmation, the tranche remains locked and the central banking agreement cannot proceed." Marissa blinked, frozen. The second representative, a woman with a clipped French accent and tightly bound braids, continued where he left off. "This terminal's treatment of Ms. Hayes has not gone unnoticed. The incident has been logged as a breach of protocol and has been escalated to our federal liaison. We expect immediate restoration of all documents, devices, and security privileges pertaining to the trustee." She turned to Alora, who still hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. Alora slowly rose from her seat, movements precise, composed, unbothered. She extended her right hand, not as a gesture of dominance, but as an assertion of ownership. The diplomat stepped forward and placed a black leather case into her palm, followed by the encrypted tablet she had been forced to relinquish earlier, and finally, the sealed envelope that had triggered the original confrontation at customs. Neither of the officials waited for a thank you. They simply lowered their heads in acknowledgement of her station and stepped back, allowing her to resume command of her own space. Around them, the silence was no longer hostile. It was stunned. Terminal staff didn't breathe, didn't shift, didn't even look at each other. They had gone from passive aggressors to silent observers of a system correcting itself, not because it wanted to, but because it had no other option. The terminal's internal interface pinged again as a final alert cascaded through every network screen in the zone, displaying the phrase, "Priority stakeholder restored clearance, unconditional, all routes open." Alora didn't glance at the screens. She already knew. Her name was no longer being questioned. Outside the executive lounge, the ripple effect was immediate and absolute. The override command from the U.S. Treasury had triggered a rare procedural chain reaction, one that bypassed public channels and instead traveled through encrypted operational networks used only in emergencies involving national-level stakeholders. Within minutes, the airport's core systems administrator flagged multiple personnel access points with internal red notices, not for system failure, but for behavioral audit. On the 12th floor of terminal operations, the Board of Facility Governance, comprising the airport's highest-ranking directors, regional oversight liaisons, and legal observers, received a high-priority summons marked executive action required. The subject line read, "Behavioral discrimination alert escalated by federal financial oversight." By the time the conference room filled, a live audit report had already begun auto-generating, its header flashing in amber. Subject: Hayes, Alora M. Incident classification: profile-based discrimination trigger. Unauthorized deactivation of Tier Red access. The system had traced each interaction, from the checkpoint dismissal, the customs override, the lounge denial, to the confiscation of encrypted material, and mapped them against time-stamped behavior logs from staff accounts. Every individual badge that had been used to interact with Alora's file was instantly placed under Level 1 hold status. This meant immediate revocation of administrative clearance, physical badge deactivation within sensitive areas, and a formal note on the employee's digital record pending investigation. 23 names populated the list in real time. At the top were Kessler, Renner, and Marissa Talcott. Each of their access credentials blinked offline as the internal disciplinary system locked them out of terminals, gate controls, and communications platforms. In a separate corner of the room, the Chief of Airport Security, Dalton Reeves, sat stiffly with arms folded, his face stone-set as the board chair read aloud from the incident briefing. "Mr. Reeves, your division processed a diplomatic fiduciary under duress, dismissed verified credentials, and reclassified a protected stakeholder without legal consultation," she stated. "Do you have anything to add?" Reeves didn't blink. "We followed standard threat identification protocol. The traveler's behavior and refusal to comply fit a profile we've been trained to flag. You're aware that the traveler in question is a signatory fiduciary responsible for the release of $600 million in bilateral funds, yes?" "I am now," he said coolly. "That doesn't change the posture we're expected to maintain." A sharp silence fell. Then, without looking at him, the board chair tapped her screen, transmitting a command. An assistant in the back whispered into a headset. 30 seconds later, a message appeared on Reeves' smartwatch and backup terminal. "Reassignment order, immediate transfer to facilities maintenance, holding compliance, review pending." One of the compliance directors looked up and clarified, "Mr. Reeves, per immediate procedural adjustment, you are being placed on administrative hold. Effective now, you are reassigned to technical facility oversight at Concourse H for a period of 14 business days. You will be removed from chain of command access until final determination is reached." Reeves stiffened. "This is a mistake." "No," the chair replied coldly. "It's a pattern." He rose, jaw tight, but said nothing more as two uniformed aides escorted him from the room. Around the conference table, no one cheered. There was no satisfaction, only recalibration. What had taken less than 90 minutes to unfold had revealed a truth that could no longer be denied. A senior-level stakeholder had been profiled, denied, and displaced not because of a system error, but because the system behaved exactly as it was conditioned to. The city's skyline shimmered beneath the early afternoon sun as waves of diplomats, finance ministers, and trade delegates filed into the glass-fronted atrium of the newly unveiled Continental Accord Hall. Flags from 12 nations rippled overhead, the sound of string instruments echoing from a modest quartet tucked near the marble staircase. At the center of it all, positioned beneath a massive arch adorned with the logos of international partners, stood a single podium bearing the crest of Bridge Africa, a symbol now synonymous with intercontinental cooperation, infrastructure renewal, and economic justice. Seated in the front row, flanked by regional governors and foreign dignitaries, was Alora Hayes, poised in a tailored navy blue suit, the same color as the seal she had once been forced to defend at an airport checkpoint. Her posture was calm, regal even, and as her name was called to deliver closing remarks, the applause that rose was not perfunctory, it was earned. She stepped forward to the podium, unfolded the speech she had written not for optics, but for memory, and let the silence settle before she began. "1 month ago," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the marble floor, "I walked into a transit hub not as a passenger, but as a trustee, authorized, verified, and empowered to execute the final signature on a multilateral financial framework designed to reshape futures across 2 continents. She paused. The room listened, and I was treated as if I was invisible. There was no anger in her tone, only clarity. If a black woman, carrying the keys to generational investment and structural equity, can still be stripped of dignity, credentials, and presence before she speaks a single word, then the problem is not her silence. It's the system that assumes it knows who she is before it listens. Murmurs rippled softly across the hall. No one interrupted. No one shifted. This initiative, Bridge Africa, is not only about money. It is about access, voice, identity. It is about building a future where worth is not filtered through skin, accent, or zip code. Because when data is ignored in favor of bias, institutions don't just fail, they betray their purpose. She stepped back from the podium to a wave of standing applause, not the kind offered for ceremonial formality, but for something earned through fire and precision. Later that week, the airport where the incident had unfolded issued a formal compliance release under the subject line: Protocol Revision, Tier Access Qualification Framework. The statement read, effective immediately, all VIP clearance assessments will be governed by credential verification systems rooted in cross-referenced institutional data. Subjective determinations based on visual or behavioral impression will be formally prohibited under new conduct protocols. The memo outlined changes including biometric pre-clearance, automated verification through encrypted networks, and third-party oversight of all flagged account activity involving diplomatic, financial, or nonprofit stakeholders. Internal documents revealed that over 30 personnel had been retrained, 6 reassigned, and 2 quietly released from their contracts. A new phrase had been added to the top of the Access Verification Platform: validate the identity, not the impression. Back in the city, at the gala following the signing, Alora stood near a window overlooking the river, speaking quietly with a finance minister from Lagos. She did not mention the airport. She did not mention the form she had been asked to sign. She didn't need to. The system had already been forced to remember her name and restructure itself accordingly. If this story made you pause, reflect, or feel something deeper about power and perception, don't forget to subscribe for more narratives that challenge what we accept as normal. What part of Alora's journey surprised you the most? Which moment did you feel the shift in power? And where in the world are you watching from? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice adds to the conversation.